Good evening. I'm Eric Lee, director of the Kimball Art Museum, and I'd like to begin by saying how wonderful it is being back in the Piano Pavilion Auditorium. This is the first public event we've had in this space since before the pandemic. It's great to be back. And it's wonderful that our first speaker is Mark Aronson, whom I've known for many years now. Mark is the Deputy Director and Chief Conservator of the Yale Center for British Art and a critic at the Yale School of Art. He received a BA from Reed College, an MS in the Conservation of Art from the University of Delaware, and a Certificate of Study in Painting Conservation from the Center for Conservation and Technical Studies at Harvard's Fogg Museum. He did postgraduate fellowships at the Cincinnati Art Museum, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and the Frans Hals Museum in the Netherlands. And he has been a guest conservator at the Getty Museum. Mark is particularly interested in Old Master and modern painting techniques and changing attitudes towards restoration. He has spoken and/or published on the history of conservation at Yale, light levels in the Yale Center for British Art, whose building was designed by the Kimball's architect, Louis Kahn. And he has lectured or published on the treatment of Italian Renaissance painting, Sir Joshua Reynolds, the Anglo-American artist Benjamin West, the Haitian painter Louis Rigaud, and a sculpture about baseball. His teaching has included courses on the history of painting techniques and seminars on technical art history with students and faculty from historically Black colleges and universities. Not only am I grateful to Mark for speaking to us tonight, but I'm also extremely grateful to Mark and to the Yale Center for British Art for lending 5 works to our Turner exhibition, including 2 oil paintings and 3 watercolors. Thank you. This evening, Mark will speak on Turner's painting technique in a lecture called Painting is a Strange Business. Please welcome Mark Aronson.
Good evening, everyone. It's such a delight to be here. It's a little bit scary to be out in public again like this, but I trust everybody is comfortable in the auditorium, and it's such a great pleasure to be here. What's more scary for me is to be here to discuss William Turner. And I'll explain more of that as we go along. When George Shackelford asked me to give this lecture, to come to the Kimball and speak about Turner, I demurred. Why me? Why me? I've never published or written about Turner or spoken at length, except maybe in the conservation studio. And I was hesitant. But there's one thing, as Eric just mentioned, I've been studying light and the light of Kahn's building at the Yale Center for British Art. And I selfishly said, oh yeah, I can go and look at the light at the Kimball Museum. My attitude towards public speaking, I'd rather go on to the Salk Institute, go west, rather than stand before you. But if I went to the Salk, I'd be led to the ocean, and the ocean is going to bring me to Turner. So I'm going to run through a series of slides extemporaneously for the most part, and periodically have some subject slides. And I'm illustrating those subject slides with pages from the Channel Sketchbook, which is one of the many, many sketchbooks Turner created in his lifetime, and it's the one sketchbook that the Yale Center for British Art owns. As I mentioned, what do I know about Turner, and how have I come across it? And, you know, the first thing that I know, there was this wonderful poster, Turner at the Tate, that was published at the time of his bicentennial, 1971. And my parents, actually, that's when they started going to Europe after the kids, that be me, were old enough to take care of ourselves, and they had enough money saved up to go to Europe. And they went to London for their first trip. And my father comes home with this wonderful poster, Turner at the Tate. And he hung it in his office, and I used to walk by this poster every day, several times a day. And it was amazing to see how excited my father was at both having seen Turner at the Tate, but also at the poster. You know, we weren't a family that was buying artwork. We were a family that were buying posters and framing them. So it's something that I grew up with. Turner is someone I grew up with from high school on. Obviously now I work at the British Art Center, and we have quite a few Turners and study them deeply. My more recent observations and education about Turner has been helped with a bunch of people, by a bunch of people. Joyce Townsend, senior scientist at the Tate Museum, has really written the books, all of the books on Turner's technique, almost. Gillian Forrester, former curator at the British Art Center, who's now at the Whitfield in Manchester. Aaron Mizek, a conservation scientist formerly at the Institute for the Preservation of Cultural Heritage at Yale, and Annika Bezer, who's still at Yale at the Institute. Rebecca Helen, or Becca, at the Tate, who's now with the National Trust. We tend to move around a lot, but, and then Dory Johnson is my current student who works for me about 5 hours a week, helped put this together. Ian Worrell and Scott Wilcox. So the material that I'm presenting is, most of it is not my own, or none of it is my own. Turner is such a vast, vast topic. It's hard to really encapsulate it all. This is just the scene of the Yale team going to the Tate and looking at pictures with Joyce Townsend, Ian Worrell, and Becca Helen. I believe that was in 2016. The first section of my talk is sources. What are the sources for looking at Turner besides looking at the artworks? The Tate has approximately, if you go online, their catalog says 39,403 artworks, approximately 37,000 drawings, approximately 300 oil paintings. And how do you get your head around it? How do you wrap your head around 40,000 works of art? The sketchbooks are one way. If you think that each sketchbook might have 50 leaves or 80 leaves or 100 leaves, and there are 300 sketchbooks, well, the number multiplies really quickly. And so that's one way to wrap your head around it. But the Tate has such a fabulous collection, and you're lucky to have many pictures upstairs on loan from the Tate. Yale has 14 oil paintings, 111 watercolors, 311 prints, a sketchbook, which I've already discussed, nearly 700 titles in the library. So when you talk about the business of Turner, he's certainly someone who inspires a lot of thinking, writing, publishing. The Tate itself lists over 400 exhibitions on Turner on their website. I went and measured, I was trying to get a handle on this talk. I went to the library and measured 16 running feet of books on Turner. Where do I begin? So you begin with the paintings. The Yale British Art Center has 14 oils that range in date from 1790s to the last picture that we have is from 1845. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but a couple. And written sources, as I mentioned, 16 feet of books and maybe 4 inches or 3 inches of book on painting technique. So that's, and 2 of them are the same, a later edition. Joyce Townsend, as I mentioned, authored the first 2, edited a conference book And then more recently, these are from the 90s. More recently, How to Paint Like Turner, How Turner Painted, and Turner's Apprentice by Tony Smibert. And I know there's at least, I believe, one young aspiring painter in the audience, and I can't recommend these enough. How Turner Painted and Turner's Apprentice are just terrific step-by-step guides on how one might learn to paint like Turner, or at least his watercolors. His oil painting is much trickier. So the first two books are much more technical. And if you go to these books, maybe this is all you need to hear from me tonight, but Tony Smibert does these wonderful watercolors where he starts with a tone page, adds a little detail, adds a little more detail, finally puts in the bridge and some more detail, and then rubs a lot of it out. And when you go, those of you who have gone to see the exhibit upstairs may have seen how diffuse and ethereal many paintings are. And they weren't that ethereal in their process. And time has also had a hand in how they look. But Smibert has done a wonderful job. Mike Chaplin has illustrated the same thing here in How to Paint Like Turner, starting with a wash and then adding detail, more detail, and then the finished painting. Turner, in majority of his works, I think, conceived of the whole image step by step. He didn't do lower left corner, lower right corner, top, then right. He thought of the whole page or the whole canvas at once and added thin layers, washy layers to lay in areas of tone and areas of color. And I think that might be a key to why so many of his unfinished paintings are still such a satisfying work to look at, because they are conceived in a complete layer across the whole canvas rather than part by part. The Tate, in addition to having all those works, has his painting materials that were in his studio at his death. His bequest to the nation included all the contents of his studio. And so there are watercolor boxes, oil palettes, tubes of, or I should say bladders of paint, glass tubes of pigment, bottles of pigment, bottles of medium. And this has been the rich area for Joyce Townsend to explore, analyzing the contents of all those studio materials. I don't want to go at length about all of his pigments, but apparently there are about 61 discrete samples of pigment in his studio, and Joyce has analyzed them all. And what's most interesting, I could give you a long list of his traditional pigments: lead white, yellow ochre, red earth, yellow earth, ultramarine blue. But what's most interesting about Turner is the use of such pigments as cobalt blue, chrome yellow, pale lemon chrome, emerald green, synthetic ultramarine, viridian, and he uses them almost straight away after they'd come out onto the market. He was very close friends with George Field, a chemist and colorman in London at the time. And he was, in a sense, he was modern in that he wanted to use whatever pigments he could get his hand on, whatever new invention was out there. So these are the pigments that have been found in his paintings by various analysis, most of them by Joyce Townsend and her colleagues. And just keep in mind that the title of Turner's Modern World, Turner, it's not just about the subjects he painted, his aspirations to push landscape forward, but his modernity also is in his choice of materials. As I mentioned, I wanted to come here. I wanted to think about Turner and Conn's light, because back in New Haven at Yale, I'm thinking about Conn's light all the time. The irony, okay, the exhibition here is in Renzo Piano's wing, not the Conn wing, but okay. So this next section is really an invitation for you all to visit. I don't know how many have been to New Haven, but when you come, you'll visit the Yale Center for British Art. It's Lou Kahn's last building. Unfortunately, he passed away before it was completed. Opened to the public in 1977. And unlike the Kahn building here, the Kimball, which has this slit in a vaulted concrete ceiling and these panels that deflect the light up onto the wall as a wash. The fourth floor of the Yale Center for British Art has skylights that open up to the sky. And I was curious about how that looks on a Turner painting, and this is our Turner area in the fourth floor. And this painting, Wreckers, coast of Northumberland, a steamboat assisting a ship offshore, is upstairs. This is the wall it hung on until late September when we took it off to send it down to Fort Worth. Here is Staffa, another picture that is upstairs. And Staffa Fingal's Cave. I think it's one of the most frequently requested paintings in our collection. And it's sort of a shocked, amazed that you got it. This painting, painted 1830 to 1832, was bought by Jacob Lennox, who founded and helped build the New York Public Library. And he brought this painting to the United States in 1845. And one person complained that it was rather indistinct. And when Turner, hearing this, is supposed to have said that he was the master of being indistinct. Anyway, this is an area, but what do we do when we lend three paintings to the Kimball Museum? Well, we take others out. And so we fill, we have 14 Turners, so we can fill up some holes in our wall. Our most important picture that I don't know that anybody's got that one, is the Dort or Dordrecht, the packet ship from Rotterdam, becalmed, painted in 1818 or 1817, 1818. And it hangs in a point of pride next to this window. We're not quite on the grid, but it's a northeasterly window. It's about, I think, 10 feet tall and 9 feet across. And we have shutters to help subdue the light. I, of course, as a painting conservator, I'm worried about fading. I'm worried about the original paintings fading, and I'm worried about my own work fading, so that part of conservation restoration is to reduce the frequency that pictures need to be restored. So I worry about this light, but there's an interesting argument for the position of the painting. Turner sold this painting to one of his dearest and closest patrons, Walter Fawkes, who brought it to Farnley Hall in Yorkshire. And so it went from either Turner's studio or from the Royal Academy, where it was exhibited in 1818, to the drawing room at Farnley Hall, where it stayed until 1966, when Paul Mellon bought it. And here at Farnley, it is also hung next to a window. So the argument for its placement at Yale is based on its historical placement. So we're trying to think, how did these paintings look when they were originally painted? Because they all change with time. We have to think about the lighting. So is this accurate? Sort of. Here's the British Art Center. That's the window. That's the wall that the Turner hangs on, right there. And this is Farnley Hall. It's a west window. The painting is hung on a north wall. And it was actually emailing with Guy Fawkes, the descendant of Walter Fawkes, 2 weeks ago about this room and how big were the windows and how much light did they emit and how far away from the windows did the painting hang. And he was so kind to have answered almost right away. And the distance, I think, was maybe 1.5 meters from the wall, so not too unlike our hang. Although he advises that the curtains are always closed because these watercolor, their collection is still in the room. The important difference, though, I don't think it should be lost, is that the painting on when it hung at Farnley, hung on the north wall, it got a west light, meaning it's coming in, it's being lit in the evening, and in New Haven, most of the light it gets is morning light. So although there is some similarity, there is a good bit of difference as well. So for me to really, as I mentioned, I'm a painting restorer, and to restore paintings, one of the first things you really need to know is how they're painted. And I'm a restorer or conservator of oil paintings, but in studying Turner, first thing you have to realize is that so much of his technique, his early technique, was based on watercolor. So I've been doing a quick study of watercolor and Turner's watercolor. And this picture is in the Yale Center for British Art, Dante de Leon, Margate, 1791. And at this time, Turner is, when you read in the literature, he was self-taught. But then his father was so proud of his work that he found a way that he apprenticed with Thomas Moulton, an architectural illustrator, and worked side by side with Thomas Girton for a while. And it is said that Girton often did the pencil outlines and that Turner filled in the color, or Turner filled in the skies. And so just as an early illustration of these two artists side by side, Girton unfortunately passed away at an early age, I think 1802 or 1803, and could have maybe perhaps rivaled Turner had he survived longer. But this is where Turner begins. If you look in close, you can sort of see the faintest pencil details. And then the washes of pale, transparent watercolor to provide the color. The white, the paleness is coming from the paper in most cases. It's usually not added white. Sometimes. He was precocious, he was accomplished. He started teaching drawing at the Royal Academy. He would do architectural rendering, teach students how to do this kind of drawing and do this kind of illustration, but I don't think it was something that he was particularly passionate about. He was just really, really good. What he became passionate about was romantic painting. At Yale we'd call it the sublime, painting that would really hit your emotions. This is one of our tour de force watercolors in the collection, Mer de Glace, the Valley of Chamonix in Switzerland. Turner loved travel, those sketchbooks that he made over the course of his lifetime, 300 sketchbooks. Recently somebody asked me if Turner liked to sail. Well, it's known that he sailed across the channel a minimum of 22 times, traveling throughout Europe, visiting the sites, using these sketchbooks as studies, a place to have a cast of characters. And then he could go back to his studio and create full-on watercolors like this, watercolors that were intended to rival oil paintings. There was a hierarchy at the time that oil painting was sort of the top of the heap, and watercolor was a lesser art, and Turner didn't feel that, and really pushed the watercolor medium to its limits. And to do so, he had to be very physical, and he had to use paper that was very stout, often. As I say, this is not my expertise. Peter Bauer has done tons of work on Turner's watercolors, but you can, if you look at these, and if you are lucky enough to come to our print study, and I invite you to make an appointment, you can have any of them come out, and you can examine it closely. And here, Dory Johnson and I are looking at Chamonix at funny angles. Publication photography flattens art. It takes away the edges. It takes away the haptic experience of seeing something directly. Going to an exhibition is great. It's the next best thing to having it in your hands. But as a restorer, one of the greatest privileges is to hold these things in your hands. Dory and I are looking at this painting a month ago in preparation for this talk. And so Turner would, as I mentioned, the Tony Smibert exercises, you tone a watercolor, say a pale yellow here, blue here, a very faint reddish ochre here. And then to get the whites, you carve into it. And you can see here, he's taken a knife, some kind of tool, and this is an abrupt edge where he's actually hacking away at the blue, removing the blue, revealing the white of the paper. Here too, these while this snow or glacier here, that's added white. Those are strokes of lead white, I believe. We haven't analyzed it, but most of his white in his gouaches were, I believe, lead white paint. But this herd of goats, that's all carved away. These are all carved away. And the closer you get, they're really small details, but the closer you get, the more you see the paper fiber. So he's applied a thin wash of color and taken it away, and then maybe gone back and added the eye as a detail. Here you can see the same thing. Large area of the goat is carved away out of the paper, and then dark ochre or bluish black washes, and maybe these are quill pen lines that to add back in the details. It's interesting, the waterfall here, you can see also that white is carved away and then it's just glazed over with the little blue. Just another example of really lovely felt drawing. It's not precise drawing, it's felt drawing, but it comes together really beautiful, and you see the white removed, little washes of blue and brown. What about darks? Darks in watercolor, it's hard to get a rich dark when you're working in watercolor. So one of the things artists will do is add a saturating layer of either the gum, the same gum that was used to glue the pigments together in a watercolor, or perhaps gelatin. So when Dory and I are looking at this painting at an angle, we're looking for this kind of thing, where the shine of the gum that was added to the darks is really evident, and it enriches, saturates them. If you think about hosing down a sidewalk, when you hose down a sidewalk, it darkens. Well, a layer of varnish on a painting or a layer of gum on a watercolor will do the same thing. Not all of Turner's watercolors were intended for this tour de force to compete with oil painting. Many of them were intended to be given to an engraver for publication. So another side of the business was how can you make these things so that more people can have them, more people can buy them, is to send them to an engraver. And these kinds of watercolors tend to be much more finely done. much more, and less painterly vibrato, much more care. Most of these photos, by the way, are taken with my iPhone. Or any kind of, the phones these days are so amazing. And you can get such a great view of artwork, and use your phone as a microscope. You can actually take pictures of a work of art and then expand it and see things you can't see with your naked eye. No pencil work that I can determine, but very, very fine brushes, carefully rendering the ship's masts, beautifully feeling the form of the figures. Turner is sometimes criticized for his figurative work. His portraits are not really portraits, but his feeling for the human figure as characters in the picture, as people doing activity, regardless of whether you can see that they're a recognizable person or not, is not important. They're just so beautifully rendered and colored. Here again, you see maybe some of that carving out of this piece of paper, and then some warm glazes to create the shadows. The sun could be left as a reserve and just use the white of the paper, or in this case, I believe there is a thin application of pigment. Joyce Townsend, I think, correctly talks about muscle memory in Turner. He always has a sketchbook in his pocket. Whenever he's traveling, he's constantly sketching, and he's learning how to render subjects and how to feel subjects and experience subjects. And watercolors like this are really rapidly done across the page from top to bottom, left to right. Just a brief indication of what it is he's looking at. Dividing, the color theorists know about Turner's use of red, yellow, and blue, and you see it blue, yellowish, maybe a little ochre, but mimicked in the boat itself. And it's this muscle memory that lets him just place a composition on a page, not have to do a preliminary drawing if he doesn't want to, and create something very quickly that reads as a finished work, whether it's a finished work or not. A couple of our later watercolors at the British Art Center, really expressing himself with paint. A quote from Joris Karl Huysmans, the French art critic and novelist from the 1880s, translated by the late Turner scholar John Gage. But it's just one of these things that, when you go and look at when you look at Turners, you stare at them for a long time trying to figure out how they're done, because they're difficult to sort out. And Huysmans says, as for Turner, at first he stuns you. You find yourself facing a confusion of pink and burnt sienna, or blue and white, rubbed on with a rag, or sometimes round and round, sometimes in lines, or in zigzags in several directions. You might say that it was done with a rubber stamp brushed over with white breadcrumbs, or with a pile of soft paints diluted with water and spread onto a sheet of paper, which is folded and then scraped violently with a stiff brush. This gives rise to an astonishing play of mixtures, especially if you scatter a few flecks of white gouache on it before you fold the paper. And so it's good to start with watercolors, because in a sense they're much simpler than understanding one of his oil paintings. His ability to place things, everybody here reads this. We all read this as a boat, but it's not really a boat. It's the feeling of a boat. It's not a rendered boat. That's not a person. It's a scratch in the paper. But Turner has this knack, this muscle memory, this ingrained ability to put a composition down on a piece of paper and execute it with paint. The artists, the aspiring artist here should practice, practice, practice. Always have a sketchbook in your pocket. The sketchbooks are just so important. If you ever get to London, you can ask to see theirs by appointment. So, moving to oil painting, this is a watercolor, unfinished. The unfinished oil paintings look much the same, right? It's worked from edge to edge, top to bottom. He knows where each building is going to be, each animal, each reflection of the animal, leaving the water whitish or creamish in reserve so that his paints will pop out when he glazes over them. The most often published unfinished Turner from the Tate collection is Shipping at the Mouth of the Thames, which, it's not too dissimilar to the watercolor at the British Art Center, but each area, blue wash, pink wash, brownish red wash, the figures are all laid in a thin wash of paint. He's using oil like he's learned to use watercolor. So we did have a chance to study Dort, and you'd think maybe that would be a telling picture to start with. My problem with it is that it's really stunning and beautiful, but technically maybe not so complex. But how did he put together a composition? As I say, these sketchbooks are always in his pocket. He goes to Europe at least 22 times. He goes to Dordrecht in 1817, and he does sketching. But these are not sketches for the painting. I should correct myself. These are referred to as studies, little characters that he might use in a painting later on. Here are some more views of Dordrecht and the harbor and some boats, a carriage that he observed. It's a character that he might deploy. But maybe more important than these studies in the sketchbook are his admiration of other painters. Gillian Forrester has written extensively on Dort. You can read her essay on the website of the salons at the Paul Mellon Center in London, and talks about his interest, the relationship between Albert Cuyp and the Mass at Dordrecht and the Dort. But John Gage talks about the aquatic feet at Dort, but another Cuyp painting that we don't know if Turner saw it, but it was published, and this print was circulating after 1813 in London. And Augustus Wall Callcott and Turner had apparently a symbiotic, friendly relationship. And Gillian talks a lot about the relationship between these two paintings, the entrance to the Pool of London and the Dort. So he's looking, as much as he's looking to his sketchbooks, he's looking at old master paintings to create his compositions. What about the painting itself? The X-radiograph, which sees area of less and greater density of paint. So you see the nails, iron, and you see lead white, which is the classic white of old master painters, deployed in the clouds, in the sails. But the sky is not especially dense, especially this painting is so bright. And yet it's the lead white in it is not as dense as you might expect. And that's because he's using the ground itself to create some of the glow, some of the brightness. In the Salon of 1818, this was critiqued. The painting was critiqued for being too bright, that Joseph Farrington, the diarist and painter of the time, said it almost put your eyes out. Gillian wonders, we wonder if it put your eyes out in relationship to the paintings it was around. The Salon everything was hung side by side. And a lot of the other painters at the time were painting fairly dark pictures. And so did it put your eyes out on its own, or did it put your eyes out in relationship to the other paintings hanging nearby? We studied this painting a little bit. The UV light shows it's in impeccable condition. It's in beautiful condition. It hasn't gone through many change. It's only gone through one market change. Until 1929, it was glazed. It hung behind a sheet of glass. And there are hardly any places to take samples, maybe down here and along the edge. And we did take a sample. And found a very coarse, inconsistent ground, which is consistent with the idea that his father, up until his father's death in 1829, his father applied the grounds in his studio. So they were not commercial grounds. They were not even and uniform at the time. They were very coarse. Aaron Mizek and Annika Bezer sorted it out quickly. Turner used a wide range of pigments, including chrome yellow, lead white, chalk, yellow and red oxides, organic reds, yellows, cobalt blue, umbers, Prussian blue, ultramarine, vermilion, bone black, and other iron-containing pigments. So that chrome is a modern picture, modern pigment, and some of the organic lakes. We were wondering whether the painting had organic yellows in it. And if you look at this sample here taken way over on the left of the painting in the sky, you can see how it seems to have faded, perhaps a little bit clearer, that the bottom of the sample is a little warmer, a little more yellow than the top of the sample. We did a microfading test to see how much color is left, and discovered that the yellows may in fact darken under the light. So it leaves me in the dark about whether the painting is close to what it looked like originally or not so close. How much has it changed? It has been lined. A canvas has been added to the back of it with an adhesive. You can see in the sky that there's a loss of texture where it's been lined. But my questions about Turner and Kahn's building are still unanswered. I was draconian. I wouldn't allow for samples large enough to understand the possibility of a faded yellow lake. It's very difficult to identify yellow lakes, and the painting is in such good condition. When paintings flake, when they have old damages, you feel less bad about taking some sample. This painting is just too good. The Dort didn't come to this show. I thought maybe I would give you a sample of something you can go and look at upstairs. The Chichester Canal from 1828 in the Tate collection it reads, again, it sort of reads as an unfinished painting, but maybe not. Maybe it's a finished painting, but it certainly reads in a way that you can see how he has used the underlying cream color of the priming to form the base upon which to do a very transparent wash of yellow to create the banks of the shoreline, and then a wash of blue for the distant horizon, more yellow up here. And if we go in closer, you can see the idea in British painting, especially the idea of dead coloring or local coloring, where you create a rectangle here to show you this is where the boat is going to be. The reflection is the same color as the boat. So quickly put down that layer of reddish brown paint, and then a few lines, a few arcs to create the gunnels of the boat, and some highlight to create a sense of volume. Squiggle some black really quickly across to get the idea of energy and rippling water and the reflection of the boat. Some dappled on white right there for more reflection. Turner is thought to have used a lot of, sometimes using water or watercolor on his oil paintings. It's very difficult to prove. Because so many of these paintings have been treated since they were made. But you can see that whatever this material here is that outlines the trees resisted the oil. It didn't stick very well. It beaded up. But maybe Turner liked that, and maybe it was a shape. You often see his fingerprint in his painting. Those who know me well know I'm a bird watcher. And you can look at Turner's birds and know what they are. This perhaps is more comical than accurate, but I believe it's a cormorant taking off from the water. Again, you see the yellow ochre underlayer, some zigzags to create the agitation of the water surface. Cormorants have upturned bills. This bird looks like it's smiling, looks like it's laughing. But in fact, a cormorant does have a beak that points upward to the sky. Activity is created by painting over the texture. So he's got the same thing, the boat is a dark form here, and then the masts are carefully rendered, and then the reflection is less carefully rendered because reflection, choppy water breaks up an image. And so here it's broken up with this by the impasto that lies underneath it. This impasto could be pure oil paint, or it could be something called McGilp. And this period in British painting was wrought with experiments in medium, and I think Turner's reputation for using strange and unusual mediums is perhaps made overly important. But late 18th century British painters were looking at 16th, 17th century Italian painters and trying to get their paint to look the same way. Part of those paintings, the appearance of those paintings is due to the age. As paint ages, it grows transparent. And so a gem-like, jewel-like, transparent-like quality of paints are very difficult to recreate in a contemporary and a modern painting. But a lot of artists of the time were trying to do it. And Turner was no different. And there was often the addition of wax. These two are just oils. This is wax, and this is something called McGilp, which is a resin and an oil and lead acetate added together. The idea is that this dollop of gel is something you can move around with your brush, and it will start to liquefy, and you can really push it around to do wonderful things. And then as soon as you stop, as soon as you remove energy from this gel, it fixes itself right where it is and doesn't move, doesn't drip. And Turner, among many other painters, use this. It's not just Turner, it's a lot of painters were using these materials. So what are these gels, these thixotropic mediums? That's what the scientists call them. Thixotropic mediums allow Turner to do is that he allows to start expressing himself more. Late Turner is kind of misunderstood because a lot of people didn't like these. I think a lot of people call it impressionistic, that he's getting more impressionistic. I don't think the Impressionists used paint like this. They kind of used paint the opposite. They used it thickly, but not in a transparent and certainly not as viscerally, not as actively. It was not, again, the idea of muscle memory and action. It's not action painting. Turner was more into action. What happens though when you're using these mediums is that they set themselves up to be mistreated in a restoration. And I just want to run through a restoration, which brings me back to fear and my fear of Turner. So I want to talk about Port Roysdale. Jacob van Ruysdael was one of Turner's he admired Jacob van Ruysdael the most, one of the most important paintings to him. One of the most important painters. And interestingly enough, here at the Kimball, you have Rough Sea at a Jetty, which may or may not have been the painting Turner was thinking about when he painted Port Roysdale. There is no place called Port Roysdale. It's in his imagination. It's an homage. It's an homage to Roysdale. But for me, the paintings are so similar. If it's not this one, then it's another one that he was looking at. It's sort of a happy coincidence that it's here. You can go see it. the Roysdale. You'll have to come to New Haven to see Port Roysdale, but to see Rough Sea at a jetty, you just have to walk down the hill. So for me, this became one of a treatment. The paint, if you see over here, you see this towering mass of dark paint, which you see a lot of towering masses of dark paint. This is smoke in the Thames above Waterloo Bridge, which is upstairs. When you leave, this is a mass of smoke coming out of these smokestacks, but I wasn't sure what this was. These are large storm clouds, but what is this? I didn't really know. And I started to do my due diligent work and found in our collection at the British Art Center a reproduction from 1900 of the painting, where you don't really see it. A 1938 exhibition pamphlet where you see it a little bit, and this 1990s postcard where you see it a lot. So I have a sense that it's restoration. It's an old damage. And that leads to treatment, and treatment leads to fear. And a few things that have been said. Joyce Townsend, the finished paintings of Turner frequently suffer from moisture sensitivity, disfiguring mold growth, flaking and priming from canvas, flaking from paint and from paint, wrinkled and cracked paint, discolored glazes and shadows, loss of texture and as a result of early linings when a new fabric is added to the back. And extreme temperature sensitivity and extreme solvent sensitivity. Joyce and Becca Helen, his completion of a painting was only the beginning of its history. Its appearance would change often faster and ultimately more radically than paintings by his contemporaries. So it's this use of all these waxes and oils and mediums. His own practice didn't help. Walter Thornbury, in early biography, describes his studio. Backwards stretched a large unfurnished room filled with unfinished pictures, then a larger and drearier room yet. Lastly, a back room against the walls of which stood his unfinished productions, large full-length canvases placed carelessly against the wall, the damp of which had taken off colors altogether or had damaged them. And sometimes he restored his own paintings. Becca Helen talks about Regulus, which he sewed back together and did his own repair to when that accidentally just tore. Stephen Hackney, there's 16 feet of books. There's only maybe 20 pages written by painting restorers. We're too scared, I think. Stephen Hackney, many of Turner's paintings have suffered greatly from a combination of artists' inappropriate technical methods and errors that have occurred during cleaning and lining. This is an interesting thing to say. This is 1995, 30 years ago. The rise of contemporary conservation. I would never think to say inappropriate technical methods. An artist chooses their methods, and as conservators, we have to respond to it. But there has been a sea change in thinking, and the kinds of treatments that were done at the Tate. Many paintings came to the Tate after his death. Some were, the National Gallery, and then the Tate. And some were just rolled up and put in the basement. And so to blame Turner's the problems with Turner paintings on the artist's techniques, for me, is a bit tricky. Hackney goes on, in some cases, errors or carelessness in his methods have directly resulted in changes in appearance or structure of paintings. In others, they have indirectly led to damage during cleaning and lining. Again, it's not Turner's fault that some of us have overcleaned paintings. A further category can be identified where damage has occurred due to inevitable aging process, so inherent vice or the way materials age. But Turner himself was extremely negligent of any painting that no longer interested him. And fishing upon the Blythe sand, tide setting in of 1809, was something somebody tried to buy from him. He was not done with it. He wanted to keep it longer, use the composition. But what did he use it at? He used it as a flap to his cat's door. And then Jim Dimon talks, another painting conservator. When cleaning a painting by Turner, one is armed with the knowledge that compared with his contemporaries, the artist had a radical approach to representing nature and experimented widely with materials to achieve spectacular effects. Turner is known to have mixed oil and wax formulations with oil resin combinations to produce paint with the desired handling characteristics and final appearance. So knowing all this, when you go to treat a painting, you better be very careful, and you better be very humble and reverent of Turner's original painting. So the Port Royal has been lined. I'm not the first person to go there, which is good. It's been lined. You can see the back has a brand new canvas, or mid-20th century canvas, I assume. The ultraviolet picture, which shows in the Dort, it was a beautiful image. It almost just looked like the same painting, just greener. Here you see all these dark spots all over the picture, which are areas of modern restoration. You take an X-ray and you find a gap, a tear. And when you get in close, it becomes clear that this is a restoration disguising this tear, and it's become quite discolored. You take a sample from a discrete area to better understand the layering. You see the coarse white, lead white and chalk ground, a brighter layer of lead white to better help your pigments glow, and then several layers, and everything above this yellow layer is restoration. This is the painting when I finished cleaning it. It's still kind of yellow because so many of these resins, McGilp's, yellow with time. And I didn't want to take too much off. This stuff is scary. It's not like painting a solid picture, a Renaissance painting done with straightforward oil paints, or even an Impressionist painting done with thick, pasty, buttery paints. It's soft, it's soluble, it's well known in the literature that these can be tricky. I left a lot of retouching. I couldn't get it off. I couldn't dissolve it. I couldn't scrape it off with a scalpel. It was so tough. It was oil retouching on top of a very soft resinous oil painting. Better that I should leave it. And finish the painting by getting rid of those dark spots with retouching, my own retouching. So I want to quickly conclude, we're almost at the end of the hour, about the other kinds of modernity is the way he paints. An artist, a successful artist will lead to other people looking at him. A successful artist will be a stepping stone to other artists. Who looked at Turner? Alfred William Hunt. He's sort of mimicking him pictorially, but not so much in a painterly way. Albert Goodwin, Scott Wilcox told me not to bother with these images, but I want to make a point that this is artists who are looking at Turner but not being Turner. Thomas Moran, you can go see this painting up the street at the Amon Carter. Maybe he's certainly a more successful painter, and as coming from somebody who looked at Turner. But in this print study, when you actually hold these things in your hand and you get that haptic experience, you relate to this stuff in a different way. The art handlers, the installers, the people that hang our exhibits, so many of them are artists, and the joy of that work, part of the joy is you get to handle it, you get to hold it, you get to think about it as a physical object. Conservators get to do it, people who come visit our print study get to do it. And you start thinking about who thinks this way, what is Turner doing? What is so modern? He's trying to use paint as its own experience. Benjamin West, there's a story about Turner having had himself tied to a mast of a ship. The painting is upstairs, this snow picture, and he says he was tied to a ship so he could experience the storm. That's not so unusual. Benjamin West did the same thing. He wanted to better paint smoke in a battle, so he had the Navy take him out in a gunship and fire off a few rounds. But West was just trying to depict it. He was trying to depict smoke. Turner was trying to experience it, and trying to figure out how he could get his paint to behave like that. Not just to look like it, but to behave like that. So I start thinking, what other artists? What are the artists that are trying to get red to look like red, blue to look like blue? Just experience it. And you come to Rothko. Rothko is somebody who was trying to get us to experience color, just for color's sake. In fact, Rothko was so enamored with Turner that he gave 6 of his paintings to the Tate. And there's actually an exhibit right now on Rothko at the Tate and his relationship to Turner. This is a sketch by Turner, 1827, 3 seascapes. It's on a roll of canvas. It was never cut up and mounted. And I guess one of them is to be read upside down. But you see this kind of thing, it's like, well, yeah, I get it. I get why Rothko was looking at Turner. You can all go down to Houston to the Menil and see the Rothko Chapel and experience color. But there are other ways to go. And one of the most exciting things that happened for me while I was conserving Port Roydsdale is Anne Meillet, the Yale MFA graduate photographer, was visiting campus and heard that I was restoring one of Turner's pictures, a seascape. And she's asked desperately if she could come and visit and see the painting. And I said, of course, come see the painting. I didn't think she was coming to take pictures of it. And she came with her full-size view camera and set up a scene in the studio with Turner. Now, Anne Meillet's work is about reconstruction, about memory. She's a Vietnamese-born American artist who reconstructs battle scenes, reconstructs what she imagined life in Vietnam to be, reconstructs Civil War battles, spent months or weeks at sea in the South China Sea on a battleship with the US Navy just to do photography. And when she heard she could come and look at a Turner in restoration, she said, can I come? And it became, she did a series of photographs. It's part of the Silent General series. And this photograph taken in the studios at Yale is now in the proud possession of the British Art Center as one of our artworks. To finish my last slide, Turner is thinking about Roysdale. Mark is thinking about Turner. So Turner's reconstructing Roysdale, a memory. Mark is like trying to get his paints to reconstruct Turner. And then Anne Meillet is using this to explore her own memory of the sea, and is inspired equally by Turner. So it's those kinds of wonderful things that I think Turner leads us to think about, not just to be modern by using modern paints or depicting as the exhibition upstairs goes through all the themes that he painted and creates an argument that makes him modern. I would say that the thing that you can't forget is that Turner became a modern artist because he was using his paint in a very modern way, not necessarily pictorially, but spiritually. Thank you very much.